This is my lathe. Nothing fancy. It's just the little 10 by 18 from Harbor Freight. I think I've had it for probably 3 years now, and it's actually been surprisingly nice. I don't really have anything to compare it against because it's my first and only lathe, but I've been able to make some cool stuff with it. My only complaint is that it is, to change the speeds, it's belt driven, so you have to move the belts. It doesn't have like the electronic speed control, which would be cool. Anyway, the biggest limitation that I have found with this lathe is the length between the drive center and the live center, which I currently don't have on here. And of course I don't have the tool rest on. And I think this is a limitation you would generally have and expect with any small lathe. They're not meant to be a full-size lathe. I want something bigger, I just don't have the room or the tool budget for it at the moment. Harbor Freight doesn't sell any accessories for this, but one thing I found is that Grizzly has a lathe that is basically identical except for the paint color. And Grizzly does sell an extension, and I have that extension right here. I've actually had this for several months, which is why there's all this dust on it. I just haven't gotten around to installing it, but we're going to try it and see if it fits on the Harbor Freight lathe. If you do go for the Grizzly, and I'll put a link in the description, when you take it out of the box, one thing to note is that the leveling feet are not attached, so don't just pull this out of the box and then throw everything away. Make sure you get those leveling feet. And then down here you have these holes for the mounting bolts. It does not come with the bolts. The lathe actually should supply the bolts, and this is where I got the idea that this might actually be extendable, because this plate is removable. I didn't bring a tripod with me, so I'm going to have to set the camera down, but I'm just going to remove these two bolts and take this plastic plate off. The bolts and lock washers have been removed. Now the tricky part is to get this piece to mate up with this piece. And I have this just sitting on my table saw right now, so I think what I'm actually going to try to do is flip the lathe over, so that the top of the bed is resting on the top of the table saw, and do the same thing with the extension, mate them up that way, and then try to bolt them together. So the lathe is flipped over. I've clamped it in place because the motor end is hanging off the edge of the table saw. I don't want it to fall off. And there could be better ways to do this, but this just seemed the easiest with the space that I have available. So this is how we're going to try to do it. So next, I'm going to try to line this up so that the holes match. That looks pretty close. And then try to get these bolts started. And they're in kind of a tricky spot, so it's going to be a little tricky to get them tensioned correctly, I think. Okay, I've got those in. Now I'm going to try to tighten those up, and it's a really awkward location. I mean, there really isn't a different way that they could do this, I don't think, but it's still kind of a pain in the butt. I've got those snugged up all the way, so now I'm going to flip it over and see if that channel matches up. First attempt, you can see they don't quite line up, and that is going to be a problem for the tailstock to be able to move back and forth. These need to line up basically perfectly. And if you look close, the amount that it's off to the left and the right is about the same. So I'm going to loosen this up just a little bit and see if I can tap it to the side. See if I can line that up. It was pretty well lined up. I've got this bolt on the right tightened up. The bolt on the left I don't, and I think that's part of my problem. If you notice, there's just there's a clump of metal right here, and I think what's happening is as I tighten this bolt, both the bolt head and the lock washer are pushing against that, and it's pushing it out of alignment. So I'm going to test that real quick just to see if that's where the problem actually is. approach this time. The first time I scooted the lock washer all the way over so that the bolt could get all the way in there. This time I didn't. I let it stick kind of at that angle, so it is twisted. It's not flat, but the bolt is really tight, and as best I can tell, I'm still lined up pretty good on the bottom. So I may just leave it like this. Alternatively, I could probably try to grind out this corner, but I think that would take a while, and I don't want to do that just yet. So we'll try this, and I'll flip it over, and let's see how it works. All right, so as far as left to right goes, that actually worked. The only problem was it was slightly twisted this way. So this side of the bed was a little bit lower. So I just took a piece of scrap angle iron, clamped one end of that to this bed, and then with this smaller clamp, I clamped right at the joint after loosening that bolt down there just a teeny bit. So now I'm going to go ahead and try to tighten that back up, this time from the bottom, which is a pain, but see if I can get that locked in. Okay, I've got those clamps off, and that actually seems pretty good. It's off just a teeny bit right here. So I may try to clamp this one too. Same thing here. I loosened this bolt just a little, put the angle iron here, clamped it in place. I think they're level. And now the other side is actually off a little bit. All right, I've got the tailstock on, and it's catching just this little tiny, that's less than a 1/16 of an inch, that it's not quite making it. So what I'm going to do, I think, on this edge of the tailstock, I'm going to take a file and just try to soften that corner a little bit and see if that'll let it through. I've got them connected, but I've just loosely tightened the bolts. I had tried tightening it all the way, and I was having a hard time getting the channels aligned. So what I'm going to try doing, I saw this in a video for a full-size lathe. I'm going to keep this loose. I'm going to put the tailstock on and slide it to right across here and see if I can get it right in the middle by moving this up and down side to side to get it right in there. Lock the tailstock in place, then tighten the bolts, loosen the tailstock, and see how it moves. All right, so I've got that centered right over the dividing line between the two pieces. So now I'm going to see if I can tighten up those nuts with the Allen key and see how we do. All right, I got that about as tight as I can get it. Well, that didn't work. I think what I'm going to have to do to make this work, I'm going to have to loosen those bolts again, move the tailstock, and I think the holes in the extension, I need to try to widen those so that I have a little more maneuverability to get these two lined up. Okay, so one thing I'm going to try, on the inside face here on the right hand side, there's just a whole bunch of extra metal. I'm going to take my little Harbor Freight band file and see if I can grind this out and see if that'll help. The holes, I just measured them, and they're 1/2 inch diameter, and there's quite a bit of play in there. So at least for now, I'm not going to try to make those any bigger. I'm just going to try cleaning this out and then try to mount it again. Alright, I've got that pretty well cleaned out. A die grinder would probably be better, a die grinder with some sort of little carbide burr or something like that, or a stone, but I don't have one, so the Harbor Freight belt file is what I used, and it seems to have done okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and try to mount it again and see what we get. Okay, I've got the screws in there. It's still a little loose, and I've moved the tailstock back right over the point where they join, and so now I'll go ahead and try and tighten those bolts up again. I think I've got it. That seems to move through there without a problem. So the key is, I think, if you go with the Grizzly extension for the Harbor Freight lathe, make sure that face where the lock washer and the bolts are going to go is clean, so that the tightening of those bolts doesn't force any deflection one way or the other. I think that's what was causing my problem. And now it's just goes right through. I think I'll also, while I've got this out of its home, I'm going to take the tailstock back off and take the tool rest off, and then I'm going to try to clean up the bed and wax it. Okay, it's all put back together. I've got the tool rest and the tailstock back. I've waxed the beds, put a little T9 bow shield on there first to hopefully get a little rust prevention. Use the leveling feet to make sure it's nice and level, even on this crappy table that I have set up right now. This takes me from a max capacity of, I want to say like 17 inches before, to 35 and a half. And that's using an aftermarket spur center and live center. The live center that comes with this lathe is about an inch and a quarter shorter, but I like this one better because there's more clearance here at the end. I'll include a link to this extension on Grizzly's website and to the Harbor Freight lathe. But so far I'm really happy with this. Obviously it was a little bit of trial and error to get it set up, just because I wasn't paying that much attention to what was right in front of my face. So if you decide to go this route, just make sure and check those holes like I said, and if you have that big gob of metal like I did, take care of that first. It'll save you a lot of frustration. So next up I need to make a baseball bat or some chair legs, or I don't know, something that'll take advantage of that capacity. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more of the things that I do in my shop, please subscribe. If you like this video, go ahead and hit like. And if you want to get notified anytime I come out with a new video, you can hit that bell button when you subscribe, and supposedly it will let you know when new stuff comes out. We'll see you next time.